Hello again. Today we are taking a look at Trillion, God of Destruction, released by Idea Factory. I'm giving away a free Steam key for the game. More details on how to enter to win it are a little later in the review. Trillion is an odd game to classify. It's part visual novel, part strategy role-playing game, and a little bit of roguelike. The premise of the game is that you only have one boss to defeat. The catch is that the boss is insanely powerful, has a trillion hit points, and he has multiple forms. You play as Xeobolus, Overlord of the Underworld. The Trillion is working his way down through the three gates of the Underworld, threatening to destroy it entirely. You send your troops to dispatch Trillion, but they are all obliterated with ease. Next up, your brother vows to go dispatch Trillion and is quickly killed, leaving behind only his sword. You vow vengeance, throwing yourself into the battle, unleashing all your power. Sadly, you do little to harm the big bad and are on the verge of death. A mystery girl named Faust offers to give you the power to defeat Trillion in exchange for your soul. So a bargain is struck, but not with the expected results. You are brought back to life as a patched up zombie with no real physical strength. Faust explains that you, the Overlord, are not going to destroy Trillion. It's only via your loyal family and subject that you can win. The price will be high, as she makes it quite clear that people are going to die along the way. Let's talk about your family and royal subjects. I'm going to butcher these names here, as I don't know that they're ever actually said out loud, so bear with me. Ruche is your niece, who is quick to point out people's faults. Levia is a devoted fighter. Fagor is the sleepyhead. Mammon is the busty tomboy. And Propel is a young blonde, very childlike in nature and appearance. And lastly, Ashmedia is the sexually suggestive demon. There are a cast of other characters, but these are the primary girls in the beginning of the game. Faust demands that you pick one of the girls to start training right away to defeat Trillion. Yet another warning is given that whoever you pick is probably going to die. The first girl I picked to train was Propel. FBI, open up! Faust has a training monster named Mokujin that takes on the exact form and stats of Trillion. How convenient. This allows you to practice fighting the boss without actually having your girl killed. Before taking on Mokujin or Trillion, you have many ways to help train your girl. You have 7 days between battles with Mokujin or Trillion to train and perform any other activities. Some activities advance the day while others do not. There are so many options for leveling and building your character that I couldn't possibly cover all of them, so I'm going to highlight a few. First up is the training option. You can train in 6 different categories, and each one levels up a specific trait, such as attack power, mana pool, magic power, reflexes, etc. Above each category for training, you may see a character portrait or multiple character portraits. That means the person in the portrait will help you with that training session, and you'll get additional experience from that one training session. The training session itself may show a conversation between characters, or it may not. Otherwise, you just complete the training automatically. There is no gameplay to the training sessions. Completing a training session grants you a medal, and medals have multiple uses. There's a fatigue bar that fills up after each training, so you can't train too many times in a row. If you train with a high fatigue level, then your training becomes less efficient, meaning you won't get as much experience. Your next option you can choose is rest. Rest in turn brings up multiple options. You can choose to sleep to reduce the fatigue level. You can choose to interact directly with your girl, which helps advance her feelings with you and grants you PTS. PTS gives you a temporary boost for your next fight. It's a giant purple bar on your screen, and instead of taking damage or using mana, the PTS bar is reduced first. Choosing to interact with your girl also makes her like you more, assuming you don't pick any wrong dialogue choices if they're offered. Another option you can pick is Order, which makes your citizens give you more gold. And lastly, you can pick Underworld Prizes, which you use your medals you earned and spend them in it's like a gumball machine where you earn different prizes. No guarantees that the prize you get will be liked by the specific girl that you have now. The next option is Valley of the Swords, which requires 5 medals. You're placed inside a dungeon where you have a set amount of moves to explore the dungeons, fight monsters, fight treasures, and return to the entrance before you run out of moves. If you survive, you get experience, and you get to keep any loot that you find. Next is Stat Increase, which is where you spend your experience points that you've been earning. It's honestly overwhelming where to spend the experience. Different abilities require different types of experience. For example, if you chose training in magic, then you'll have more points to spend on magic abilities. This is the part of the game that I don't think there was enough explanation on. I felt lost because there were so many different ways to spend my experience points that I don't know if I was making good choices, such as, should I be specializing in one or two stats, or should I be spreading it all around? The next option is character, where you can view your stats and change around your equipment or your Devil Envoy, which is something I'll cover later. Items are where you can choose to give your girl those items that you got out of the gumball machine, and that can boost her affection and earn additional PTS for the next fight. Research Lab is where you purchase additional gear and items to use in combat. Blacksmith is where you upgrade your weapon and attach additional modifiers to it at the expense of gold. Royal Quarters is where you view information on monsters, Trillion stats, girls' responses to gift, etc. It's basically a giant encyclopedia. So that wasn't everything, and that wasn't even very in-depth on what I covered, but for the purposes of this video, I think that gives you an idea of the depth to this game. Let's move on to combat. Despite all the leveling options, combat is not as in-depth as you might expect. The strategy is more in how you move your girl across the grid. Your girl moves across the grid one at a time, and each time she moves or takes an action, the enemy takes an action. The grid will change color to let you know if something is going to happen on that grid in the next few turns. Trillion's attacks are telegraphed on the grid. Yellow means he's going to attack there in 3 turns, orange 2 turns, red means it's going to hit there on the next turn. Getting caught in one of Trillion's attack pretty much means it's an instant death. Luckily, your moves are instantaneous when you attack. Periodically, Trillion or Mokujin will spawn enemies on the map. Enemies will auto-attack you anytime you're in their range. Early on, you can only take 1 to 2 hits from an enemy. If you defeat an enemy minion, which is very easy to do, you get to take another action immediately. There is strategy involved in knowing when to encounter enemies so that you don't get stuck on a bad tile. Moving around the grid is awkward and takes a lot of getting used to. You move with the D-pad, but the D-pad is horrible at doing moves at an angle. The game even tells you that in the tutorial. What you really have to do is use the right and left bumper buttons to rotate the camera so that when you're moving diagonally, you're actually moving up and down. It took me a while and a few deaths to understand the cameras and the controls. Fights with Trillion are difficult and drawn out. He doesn't just attack you directly. He covers a large portion of the board with potential attacks, damaging poisons, and spawning different enemies. I spent more times in the fights with Trillion moving around dodging attacks than I did attacking him, which is part of the challenge. He wouldn't be much of a challenge if you could just keep attacking him. He has different forms he takes if you bring his health meter down. Each new form is all new attacks and requires completely new strategies. You can also bring friendly minions into the battle to help you out, which they're limited by your charm stat. They're helpful for the enemy minions that Trillion spawns, but they definitely will not be doing anything to Trillion himself. Each battle with Trillion or Mokujin took me about 30 minutes, and each time I did very little damage to his gigantic health pool. For graphics, this game has 2 parts. The cutscenes, interacting with characters, and basically anything that's not combat is absolutely gorgeous. The characters are beautifully drawn, they have lots of details, great color schemes, and they're drawn with personality. Menus and backgrounds are equally as detailed. This game reminds me a lot of Disgaea. I have to assume it's either some of the same team that worked on Disgaea, or the team was directly inspired by Disgaea. Combat graphics don't fare nearly as well. This game was originally released on the PSP, and the battlegrounds and the enemies really match that system's limitation. Since most of the time is spent leveling or interacting with characters, it's not that big of a deal. Going back to the character interactions, there are random events that happen that can unlock new equipment or dialogue choices. This keeps the leveling process fresh and prevents the game from being a rush to just min and max your stats. I have a lot of praise for this game, but I do have to mention a few of the lesser items. The camera in this game will fight you anytime you get close to Trillion. His large hitbox it gets in the way when you're trying to turn the map around, and if you're trying to look directly over your character, which is something you'll do a lot, you can't see your character and you can't see a few squares around it just because Trillion's head is in the way and you can't see it. It's very frustrating. Secondly, you're kind of just left floating in the breeze for understanding how to build your character. Since combat is 7 days between, and you oftentimes don't hit Trillion that many times in a battle, it's not clear to me, at least, if I'm building a good character. That's frustrating if you're making a legitimate attempt to beat the game in one playthrough. I do know from reading on the Steam forums that there are options for New Game Plus, so I'm going to assume that failing is almost expected for your first playthrough. This game offers a lot of complex systems set in pace with a good story and lovable characters. There's a lot to see and do here. To enter to win, simply click on the link in my video description. I'm doing it this way because thanks to the changes with YouTube, I don't have a good way just to message somebody directly from the comments. There's no newsletter or anything to sign up for. This is just a straight giveaway. I'm going to be giving away a lot more games between now and Christmas, so please consider subscribing so that you'll be the first to know about your chance to win a free game.